Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of extreme clinical precision.
Right, like it's a binary system.
Exactly. It's like engineering.
Yeah.
You break your arm, the X-ray shows that jagged white line on the black film, and the doctor just points and says, there it is.
Broken or not broken, sick or healthy, we really crave that kind of categorization, I think, because it gives us this illusion of control.
It is so comforting.
Yeah.
But then you step into the world of human nature, into this sprawling, messy landscape of ancient history and mythology, and suddenly someone takes a hammer to that X-ray machine
No, absolutely.
and try to look at a person's legacy,
Yeah.
and the diagnostic landscape is just completely muddy.
It is the absolute definition of muddy waters, especially when, a character's legacy has been actively rewritten, celebrated, and condemned by billions of people over literally thousands of years.
Which brings us to the core mission of today's deep dive. We're jumping into a staggeringly complex reality to deconstruct one of the most infamous, polarizing, and I'd argue deeply misunderstood figures in global mythology.
I'm so excited for this one.
Me too. We're talking about Ravana, the legendary 10-headed demon king of Lanka from the ancient Indian epic, the Ramayana. And just to give you an idea what we're working with, for this analysis, we have an absolute mountain of source material.
We really do. It's a huge stack.
Yeah, we're pulling from the original Sanskrit Valmiki Ramayana, sweeping through ancient Jain literature and Southeast Asian texts from Thailand and Malaysia.
Right.
We've got modern subaltern literature, sociological research papers, and deeply rooted regional Indian folklore. We are looking at this from every conceivable angle.
And honestly, that multitude of angles is strictly necessary because the standard narrative that most people are familiar with is, frankly, completely one-dimensional.
Right.
It flattens this towering, incredibly complex psychological profile into just a simple cartoon.
Okay, let's unpack this because the central paradox we're dealing with here is just mind-bending. If you walk up to almost anyone on the street and ask about Ravana, they will tell you he is the ultimate, unredeemable villain.
The bad guy.
Right. He is the terrifying, lustful monster who kidnaps the virtuous queen Sita. Every single year during the festival of Dussehra, massive, towering effigies of Ravana are stuffed with fireworks and burned to the ground across the globe.
It is a literal fiery celebration of good destroying evil.
But then you actually open up these ancient texts, you start reading the footnotes of the very epic that condemns him, and you realize you are looking at a staggering alternate reality.
It's almost disorienting, isn't it?
Totally disorienting, because these texts explicitly state that this same demon was a pioneer in pharmaceutical medicine, a master scholar who memorized the universe's most complex scriptures, a democratic ruler who supposedly eradicated poverty in his kingdom.
He was an inventor of musical instruments, too.
Yes, and arguably one of the greatest, most obsessive saints and devotees to ever walk the earth. I mean, how do you reconcile that?
Well, the crucial takeaway right off the bat is that ancient mythology is rarely interested in black and white morality. To understand how the greatest saint devolved into the greatest villain, we have to look past the victor's sanitized version of history.
You have to dig into the gray areas.
Exactly. We have to explore the profound, terrifying duality of human nature that Ravana represents. We are going to explore how absolute brilliance, when it's coupled with a single, unchecked, fatal flaw, can just completely and utterly detonate a legacy.
So before we can even look at the monster with 10 heads, we have to rewind the clock. We really need to look at the marginalized child who had to fight tooth and nail just to justify his own existence.
This origin story is so crucial to understanding everything he does later.
It really is. Ravana's identity crisis begins the literal second he is born. The texts say he was born in the Treta Yuga, which is the second out of the 4 ages of time in Hindu cosmology. His father was the revered Brahmin sage Vishrava.
And we should put that in context. That makes Ravana the grandson of Pulastya, who was one of the 10 Prajapatis.
Right. And for those unfamiliar, the Prajapatis are essentially the mind-born sons of the creator god Brahma.
They are the supreme cosmic architects. So on his father's side, Ravana possesses the absolute top-tier, untouchable elite lineage.
It's the ancient equivalent of being like royalty mixed with a Supreme Court justice.
Yeah.
But his mother was a woman named Kaikesi. She was a Daitya, or a Rakshasa princess, a demon.
We need to pause on that word demon, though.
Yeah, please do, because that word carries a lot of baggage.
It does. If we look at the sociological and racial dynamics prevalent in the sources, demon is often a loaded political term. The texts describe two heavily contrasted groups. You have the Devtas, who are historically associated with the Aryans in the northern regions of the Indian subcontinent.
Right, and they claimed a supreme divine status.
Exactly. They were the architects of a rigid societal structure that placed Brahmins, the priestly class, at the absolute pinnacle. Then you have the Asuras or Rakshasas in the south.
Who were deeply marginalized.
Very deeply. The northern storytellers often depicted them as dark-skinned, culturally barbaric, and just inherently inferior.
So Ravana was trapped directly on the fault line of this massive cultural earthquake. I mean, he was half Brahmin and half demon. It's a profound systemic identity crisis.
He was a child of two warring worlds.
Which meant, practically speaking, he belonged to nowhere. He wasn't fully accepted by the elite Brahmins because of his mother's blood, and he stood apart from the Rakshasas because of his father's supreme lineage.
The psychological toll of that kind of displacement is just enormous. He was relentlessly mocked.
Yeah, one of our sources, Anand Neelakantan's novel, Asura, Tale of the Vanquished, tells the story entirely from the perspective of Ravana and his people.
It's a fascinating read.
It really is. The book highlights the harrowing details of his childhood. His own mother, Kaikesi, would constantly remind him of his dark skin and his so-called evil spirit heritage.
She didn't exactly nurture him.
No, not at all. She weaponized his marginalization. She used the systemic racism of their world to push him, basically demanding that he lift himself out of poverty and obscurity through sheer, unrelenting willpower.
It's a fascinating, dark origin story. She's essentially telling him, the world hates you, so you must become so powerful that they cannot ignore you.
Right, and the environment of oppression he grew up in wasn't just, casual name-calling. Because of his mixed heritage, specifically his Rakshasa blood, the sources note that he was actively denied a formal education.
Yeah, the elite Brahmin teachers of his era took one look at his lineage and flat out refused to teach a child they viewed as a lower caste impurity.
He was systematically excluded from the halls of knowledge. But wait, let me stop you right there.
Sure.
If he was completely barred from formal education, locked out of the ancient universities, so to speak, how does he become known globally as an unparalleled genius? Because even the texts that hate him admit the guy was brilliant. How does that happen?
That is the terrifying power of a highly intelligent, marginalized person who has a chip on his shoulder the size of a mountain.
So he just taught himself.
Completely. His knowledge wasn't handed to him. It was violently acquired through self-teaching. He was fueled by this burning, obsessive ambition to humiliate his oppressors by beating them at their own game.
Wow.
He didn't just casually read the scriptures in secret. He comprehensively mastered them in ways that the very Brahmins who rejected him couldn't even fathom.
Driven by this intense need to prove himself, he completely obliterates the limits of human learning. And this perfectly transitions us to the most famous visual associated with him, the 10 heads.
Vashana.
Right. We always see him depicted in art and effigies as this terrifying 10-headed monster. But the ancient texts reveal a deeply positive, highly intellectual symbolism behind those heads.
Yeah.
Right? It wasn't just a biological mutation.
Exactly. The 10 heads are largely understood as a potent metaphor for extreme intellectual capacity. Specifically, they represent his absolute flawless mastery of the 4 Vedas and the 6 Shastras.
Let's break that down for the listener, because it's not just like he read 10 books.
Not at all. The 4 Vedas, Rig Veda, Yajurveda, Samaveda, and Atharvaveda, are the oldest, most foundational scriptures of Hinduism. They contain complex philosophy, hymns, and the science of the era.
Yeah, Shastras.
The 6 Shastras are supplementary texts that govern various aspects of life, including law, architecture, logic, and grammar. Mastering even one of these texts was considered the work of a lifetime for a brilliant scholar.
And Ravana mastered all 10.
All 10. The metaphor is that he possessed the intellectual processing power of 10 extraordinary men. He was essentially a walking, breathing, ancient supercomputer.
A supercomputer who had to fight for every single scrap of data. The texts say he mastered 64 distinct kinds of arts. He was a proficient mathematician, a physicist, an astrologer.
His breadth of knowledge was staggering.
He went from a rejected, impoverished half-blood to the most formidable scholar on the planet. But just being smart wasn't enough to secure his place in a hostile world. He needed actual power.
And to get that, he undertook an unimaginable level of penance.
Right. The texts describe him, along with his brothers Kumbhakarna and Vibhishana, traveling to Mount Gokarna and meditating for 10,000 years to win the favor of the creator god Brahma.
And we really must understand what penance means in this mythological context. It's not just sitting quietly with your eyes closed on a yoga mat.
No, it is severe self-destructive asceticism. Self-destruct is putting it mildly.
Very mildly.
The lore says he literally sacrificed himself over and over to prove his devotion. He built a sacrificial fire, took a sword, chopped off his own head, and offered it into the flames.
Because of his mystic power, a new head would grow back.
Which is wild. And he did this 10 times. Finally, right as he's about to sever his head for the 11th time, Brahma appears. He's horrified, but impressed by this bloody, unwavering focus, and he grants him a boon.
A wish, essentially.
Exactly. Ravana asks for invincibility against gods, celestial beings, demons, spirits, and serpents.
Notice the glaring omission in that list.
He leaves out humans and animals. He thinks they're too weak, too pathetic to ever pose a threat to him. It's a massive blind spot.
It's the classic hubris that almost always accompanies a genius who has isolated themselves. He accounts for the macro-level cosmic threats, but just completely ignores the mundane variables.
Right, he doesn't think a regular human could ever touch him.
Exactly. But his ascetic devotion didn't stop with Brahma. While Brahma granted him invincibility, his absolute uncompromising devotion was directed toward Lord Shiva, the god of destruction, transformation, and asceticism.
And the stories of his devotion to Shiva are where you really see the manic intensity of his character. It's not a quiet, peaceful worship.
No, it's very loud.
There's this incredibly famous legend where Ravana, riding high on his new invincibility, decides he wants to do something nice for his mother.
Yeah.
She worships Shiva, so Ravana thinks, hey, I'll just bring Shiva to her.
As one does.
Right. So he goes to Mount Kailash, which is the literal home of Lord Shiva, and in a moment of sheer, terrifying arrogance, he physically lifts the entire mountain off its foundations.
He uproots a god's sanctuary.
It's insane. Shiva, who is sitting on top of the mountain with his wife Parvati, feels the tremor. He is somewhat amused by the arrogance, but he recognizes that a lesson in humility is required. So Shiva simply presses down with his right big toe.
The imagery there is phenomenal.
The cosmic weight of the god transfers through the mountain, and Ravana's arms are instantly crushed beneath the stone. He is pinned. The texts say he is trapped there, screaming in agony as the weight of a mountain grinds his bones for 1,000 years.
Most beings would curse the god in that situation. They would beg for mercy, or their minds would simply shatter from the sheer pain.
But not Ravana. Instead of breaking, he uses his own physical torture as creative inspiration. While trapped beneath millions of tons of rock, his arms completely crushed, he composes the Shiva Tandava Stotra.
And we should note, this isn't just a quick prayer.
No. It is an incredibly complex, rhythmically intense, galloping hymn of praise written in flawless Sanskrit. It's literally designed to mimic the sound of Shiva's cosmic dance of destruction.
It's a masterpiece.
And if composing a masterpiece while crushed wasn't enough, the lore says he actually tore off one of his own crushed, mangled arms. He ripped out his own sinews and veins, strung them across the bone, and used them to create a brand new bowed string instrument called the Ravanhatha.
He plays this gruesome instrument and sings his newly composed hymn with such profound, earth-shattering beauty and devotion that Lord Shiva actually begins to weep.
The music is so perfect it moves the god of destruction to tears.
It's incredible. Shiva lifts the mountain, forgives him, blesses him, and grants him the title Ravana, which translates to the one who roars, or the one who causes the world to cry out.
And he also gifts him an invincible celestial sword called the Chandrahas. I mean, you cannot put a character like that neatly into a box.
You really can't.
He has the insane arrogance to try and steal a god's mountain, but also the unparalleled devotion and artistic genius to make that same god weep with a song played on his own severed nerves. It's viscerally compelling.
And what's wild is that he wasn't just a mystic and a musician, he was an incredibly methodical scientist.
Yes. Let's talk about that. His scholarly output was vast and deeply practical. I really want to focus on the mechanics of what he was doing, because it completely shatters the image of a primitive demon.
Absolutely. He authored a foundational Sanskrit compendium called the Arka Prakasha. This was a deep dive into the science of distillation and essential oils.
This is a critical point, right? Because in ancient Ayurvedic medicine, many practitioners would just boil herbs and roots in water to create medicinal decoctions.
Yes, but the problem is that boiling destroys the volatile, heat-sensitive compounds, the essential oils that contain the most potent medicinal properties. Ravana recognized this flaw.
So he figures out the mechanics of distillation. He creates systems to capture the steam, cool it, and extract the pure volatile oils preserving the precise medicinal potency of the plants. He's acting as an ancient biochemist.
He really is. He is highly revered in the Ayurvedic tradition as a pioneer of pharmaceutical science, a field specifically known as Hashaja Kalpana. Hashaja relates to medicine, and Kalpana refers to the preparation or formulation.
So he essentially modernized ancient pharmacology.
He did. He also wrote extensive treatises on Ayurvedic alchemy, figuring out how to purify heavy metals for medicinal use, and he perfected the science of pulse diagnosis.
Reading the exact rhythm of a patient's heartbeat to diagnose internal imbalances, right?
Exactly.
And here is my absolute favorite detail from the sources. He wrote a book called the Kumara Tantra. This is a highly detailed text on pediatric medicine and gynecology. And he wrote it specifically because his wife, Queen Manadari, was distressed about childhood illnesses in their kingdom.
It's such a tender detail.
It is. She asked him for a solution. So the 10-headed, mountain-lifting demon king sat down and wrote a pediatric textbook to help mothers cure their sick babies.
It completely destabilizes the cartoon villain narrative. He also authored the Ravana Samhita, a massive anthology of Hindu astrology that is still referenced by astrologers today. He was an unmatched polymath.
And his expertise was so universally recognized, so undeniably elite, that it commanded respect even from his worst enemies.
Yes. Let's talk about the Rama Setu incident, because this absolutely blew my mind when I first read it.
Please do, because this is wild.
So fast forward to later in the epic, Lord Rama is preparing to invade Lanka to rescue his wife, Sita, whom Ravana has kidnapped. Rama needs to build a massive stone bridge across the ocean to reach the island.
Right.
But before undertaking this monumental military engineering feat, Rama has to perform specific Vedic rites to bless the construction and appease the sea god. To do this correctly, the ritual demands the absolute best, most spiritually qualified Brahmin priest available.
And who's the most qualified Brahmin alive? It's Ravana,
Yeah.
the man who's currently holding Rama's wife hostage.
Exactly. So Rama actually sends an official invitation to Ravana. He basically says, I am coming to destroy you, but I need a priest to bless my bridge first. Will you do it?
And Ravana, respecting his dharma, his cosmic duty as a Brahmin, and a scholar above his role as an enemy king, humbly accepts.
He flies over, performs the intricate Vedic ceremonies flawlessly for Rama, blesses the bridge that will literally be used to transport an army to kill him, and then goes back to Lanka to prepare his defenses.
I mean, what does that say about the code of honor in the ancient world?
It highlights a society that compartmentalized duty in a way that is very difficult for a modern mind to grasp. Ravana's dharma as a Brahmin priest required him to perform a sacred rite if respectfully requested by a worthy patron,
So he just fulfilled that intellectual and spiritual duty without hesitation.
completely separating it from his personal and political enmity with Rama. It shows a level of ethical complexity, a rigorous adherence to principle that is just entirely absent in modern narratives of pure good versus pure evil.
And his adherence to structure extended to how he governed his own people, too.
Yeah.
The sources agree that as a king, he was incredible. Under his regime, his kingdom was famously known as Sonki Lanka, Golden Lanka.
He was a highly capable Chakravarti, a universal emperor who ruled a vast, prosperous domain across South Asia. The architectural descriptions of Lanka in the texts describe paved roads, advanced sanitation, and immense wealth.
And crucially, the sociological research notes that he was the first ruler to actively erase caste distinctions among the people of his kingdom.
That ties right back into his childhood trauma, doesn't it?
Exactly. Being marginalized, called a dirty half-blood, denied an education. When he gained absolute power, he didn't recreate the oppressive Aryan systems of the North. He united the disparate tribes. He created a society where a person wasn't judged by the purity of their Brahmin blood. He took care of his people.
Which brings us to the inevitable pivot.
Right. I have to ask the obvious question. If he is this perfect philosopher king, a master scientist who writes medical books for babies, a devoted husband, an unparalleled artist, and a ruler who eradicates poverty and caste discrimination, what goes wrong?
How do we get to the villain?
Yeah, how do we get from Golden Lanka to lighting fireworks inside his burning effigy?
Well, it's the great tragedy of his character. No one becomes a villain overnight. Ravana's descent isn't a sudden flip of a switch. It is a complex, agonizing web of cosmic curses, deeply rooted family trauma, and an ego that grows so large it just eclipses his intellect.
Let's track the descent. It really pivots on three major events and three horrific curses. Let's start with the inciting incident of the entire Ramayana war, the abduction of Sita.
Right.
Because if you read the children's version of the story, Ravana is just a monster overcome by sudden irrational lust, so he swoops in and steals Rama's wife. But the primary sources reveal a much more complicated motivation, rooted heavily in retaliation and family honor.
To understand the abduction, we must look at the catalyst. Lord Rama and his brother Lakshmana were living in exile in the Dandaka forest. During this time, Ravana's sister, a Rakshasa woman named Shurpanakha, happens upon their camp.
Okay.
She sees the brothers, is captivated by them, and expresses her strong affection, proposing marriage.
And the brothers don't just say, "Sorry, we're taken."
No, they don't. They actively mock her. They send her back and forth between them in a cruel joke. And when she persists, becoming angry, Lakshmana responds with extreme, disproportionate violence.
Brutal.
He draws his weapon and brutally mutilates her, cutting off her nose and her ears. She flees back to Lanka, bleeding, disfigured, and deeply humiliated.
When you read that from a modern perspective, it's chilling. Lakshmana physically mutilates a woman simply for expressing her desire. And think about how Ravana processes this. He sees his sister bleeding and violently disfigured by these two arrogant princes from the north.
These are the exact people, the Aryan elite, who have oppressed, mocked, and marginalized his kind since he was a child.
Exactly. The psychological trigger is pulled.
Ravana, as the sovereign king and as a fiercely protective older brother, felt a profound, culturally ingrained duty to avenge his sister's honor. In many traditions and subaltern readings of the text, the kidnapping of Sita wasn't an act of blind lust at all.
It was retaliation.
It was an act of calculated, precise retaliation. The logic was brutal but clear. You mutilated the woman in my family, so I will take the woman in yours.
But this is where his brilliance completely betrays him. This is where we see the Greek concept of hamartia kicking in.
Yes, hamartia, the fatal flaw. It's the tragic error in judgment that inevitably leads a great hero to their downfall. Ravana's fatal flaw was his ahankara.
Ahamkara, his unchecked ego and blinding pride.
Precisely. His ego told him that because he had defeated the gods, because he possessed the intellectual capacity of 10 men, he was fundamentally above the moral law. He believed he could commit a profoundly wrongful act, abducting an innocent woman to settle a score and simply manage the cosmic consequences through his own sheer power.
He thought he was too smart for karma to catch him.
He really did.
And that ego had been bloating for a long time, leading him to commit acts that completely permanently shatter his saintly persona. Because to be absolutely clear to the listener, the ancient sources do not let him off the hook. He did monstrous, indefensible things.
We have to talk about the curses.
Let's do that. Let's start with the curse of Vedavati.
The story of Vedavati illustrates how power corrupted him long before he met Sita. Vedavati was a deeply pious woman living an ascetic life, meditating alone in the forest. Ravana, flying by, saw her and was captivated by her beauty. He approached her and demanded she marry him.
And she said no.
She firmly and politely rejected him, explaining her devotion lay elsewhere.
But Ravana, blinded by his absolute power and completely unable to process the word no, didn't accept her rejection. He physically assaulted her, aggressively grabbing her by the hair.
The violation of her bodily autonomy and her ascetic purity was profound. The texts say she was so furious, so deeply violated, that she invoked a cosmic curse.
What did she say?
She swore that she would be reborn for the sole specific purpose of causing his utter destruction. And then, to escape any further defilement, she stepped into a blazing sacrificial fire and immolated herself.
It is a dark, deeply disturbing narrative that reveals the terrifying extent of his arrogance. And it gets worse. There's also the curse of Nalakuvara, which follows an act of violence that is even more heinous.
This one is particularly grim.
Ravana encounters a beautiful apsara, a celestial nymph named Ramba. Again, consumed by lust and ego, he propositions her. She begs him to stop. She explains that she is actually the wife of his own nephew, Nalakuvara.
Which, under the Vedic familial structure, effectively makes her his daughter-in-law.
Right, and the cultural taboo against harming a daughter-in-law was absolute. But his ego simply overrides all morality and familial boundaries. He rapes her.
It's horrific. When Nalakuvara discovers what his uncle has done, he is devastated and enraged. He casts a powerful, binding, cosmic curse on Ravana. If Ravana ever attempts to touch a woman without her explicit consent again, his head will instantly, violently split into 1,000 pieces.
See, this curse is a massive, crucial puzzle piece for anyone reading the Ramayana. It explains one of the most glaring plot holes in the epic. Listeners often wonder, if Ravana was this purely evil, lustful demon who kidnapped Sita, why did he keep her imprisoned in the Ashoka Grove for nearly a year without ever forcing himself on her?
Right. The standard sanitized narrative simply claims that she was protected by the sheer power of her own purity, creating this invisible shield of virtue.
But the deeper, grittier, textual reality is that Ravana was literally biologically prevented from assaulting her because of Nalakuvara's curse.
Exactly. He couldn't force her without his head exploding, so he was reduced to trying to win her over through a psychological campaign of wealth, persuasion, and intimidation, which he utterly failed to do.
There's also a third cosmic curse that predates all of this, mentioned in the Bhagavata Purana. It says Ravana and his brother Kumbhakarna were actually reincarnations of Jaya and Vijaya.
Ah, the gatekeepers.
Yes, they were the celestial gatekeepers of Vaikuntha, the divine realm of Lord Vishnu. They insolently blocked some powerful, pure-hearted monks from entering, and as punishment, they were cursed to be expelled from heaven and born as demonic beings on earth for 3 lifetimes.
All of these curses represent the universe balancing the scales. His intellectual brilliance was constantly warring with and eventually overwhelmed by his moral failures.
Okay, I have to pause here. I'm trying to wrap my mind around this character profile. Yeah. We have a man who is a fiercely protective brother, a scientifically advanced democratic king, and a devout ascetic who literally chopped off his own heads for God.
Yes.
But he's simultaneously committing horrific, unforgivable acts of assault, mutilation, and kidnapping. How do we reconcile the saint with the monster? How do those two extremes exist inside the same ribcage?
The difficulty you're experiencing is exactly the point. What's fascinating here is that Hinduism, particularly in its deepest philosophical and psychological texts, allows for exactly this level of complex duality.
It's not just good versus evil.
No, the worldview isn't a strict infantile binary of pure angels and purely evil demons. The texts are teaching us that nobody is completely evil and nobody is completely good. Ravana wasn't a one-dimensional monster who occasionally pretended to be a saint. He was a genuinely great, brilliant man who was entirely corrupted by absolute power, unchecked privilege, and a fundamental failure to control his own physical senses and ego.
He had the data, but not the wisdom.
Exactly. His intellectual knowledge of the universe was vast, but he lacked the internal spiritual wisdom required to govern his own primal desires.
It's the ultimate tragic cautionary tale. He had everything unmatched power, a genius intellect, immense wealth, divine boons, but because he couldn't control his ego when it came to his sister's honor or his own lust, he burned his entire golden kingdom to the ground.
Precisely. And because Ravana is such an undeniably complex, multifaceted, and tragic figure, not all cultures agreed with the poet Valmiki's portrayal of him as the primary villain.
Oh, this is where it gets really interesting.
As the story of the Ramayana spread across the trade routes of Asia over centuries, different cultures looked at this narrative, saw the underlying nuances, and completely rewrote the script to fit their own moral frameworks.
Okay, I love this part. Let's step outside of the standard Hindu Ramayana and look at these alternative universes, because the way other cultures interpreted him blew my mind. Let's look at the Jain Ramayana, specifically a text called the Paumacharya, written by the monk Vimalasuri.
In the Jain tradition, the central moral framework is entirely different. It relies heavily on the concept of ahimsa, which is absolute nonviolence.
Right.
In the Jain spiritual hierarchy, Lord Rama is considered a Baladeva. A Baladeva is a pure, spiritually elevated, perfectly nonviolent hero. Because Rama has reached such a high state of spiritual purity, he is physically and morally incapable of taking a life. He cannot, under any circumstances, kill Ravana.
Wait, if Rama can't kill Ravana, how does the epic end? Who kills him?
In the Jain texts, the burden of violence falls to Lakshmana. Yeah, Lakshmana is depicted as the fiercely loyal but more earthly, passionate brother. He commits the violent act of killing Ravana so that Rama's soul can remain pure.
That is fascinating. But what's truly remarkable about the Jain version is how they treat Ravana himself. He is not a demon, he is a Vidyadhara.
Let's explain what a Vidyadhara is.
A Vidyadhara translates loosely to a wisdom holder. They are a class of noble, magical, technologically advanced beings who possess supernatural abilities.
Right, so in the Jain narrative, Ravana is a highly devout, deeply learned Vidyadhara. He is a tragic figure brought down entirely by his human weaknesses, specifically his sudden infatuation with Sita, not by any inherent demonic evil.
And the most mind-blowing detail for me in the Jain texts They actually prophesy his future salvation. The Jain texts say that, yes, Ravana must go to hell to work off the immense bad karma he accumulated by kidnapping Sita.
He still has to pay the price.
Right. But because of his underlying nobility, his vast devotion, and his intellectual brilliance, once his karmic debt is paid, Ravana will be reborn in a future age as a Tirthankara.
A Tirthankara is the absolute highest spiritual position in Jainism. They are supreme, omniscient spiritual teachers and saviors who show others the path to liberation.
So the ultimate villain of the Hindu epic eventually becomes the ultimate savior in the Jain epic.
It completely flips the moral of the story.
It does. And we see similar massive transformations as the epic traveled across the ocean to Southeast Asia. Let's take the Malaysian adaptation, the Hikayat Seri Rama.
Remember, this text evolved in a region heavily influenced by a mix of Indian traders, indigenous animism, and later Islamic culture.
Right. In this Malaysian version, Ravana is known as Maharaja Wana, and the texts portray him as relatively more honorable and righteous than Rama.
It's true. The Malaysian text depicts Seri Rama as somewhat egotistical, arrogant, and highly self-righteous. Maharaja Wana, by contrast, is given far more sympathetic, justifiable motivations for his actions.
That is a 180-degree turn. And in Thailand, the epic becomes the Ramakien. There, Ravana is known as Thotsakan. He isn't a mindless, roaring brute. He is portrayed as a highly cultured, refined ruler with perfect courtly manners and deep, binding family attachments.
The Thai version focuses heavily on the visual spectacle of the Khan, which are traditional masked dance dramas.
Yeah, and when Thotsakan is finally defeated on the battlefield, it isn't a quick, triumphant execution. It is a prolonged, deeply theatrical, intensely emotional death scene where the audience is meant to mourn the fall of a great king.
Similarly, in Cambodia, the character of Ravana is viewed through a distinctly Buddhist lens of moral causality.
How does that change him?
Well, he is seen as a tragic ruler whose downfall is the direct, unavoidable result of his accumulated moral failures. His defeat isn't framed as a divine punishment handed down by an angry god, but simply as the inevitable tragic consequence of his own karmic choices. The narrative emphasis is heavily placed on his family relations, his deep regret, and his slow ethical collapse.
And we don't even have to look outside of India to find these massive, disruptive perspective shifts. Let's bring back Anand Neelakantan's modern novel, Asura, Tale of the Vanquished. This book introduces a shocking narrative twist that flips the entire emotional core of the epic on its head.
I love this part.
In this version, Sita is not a stranger he kidnaps. She is actually Ravana's own daughter.
It's a profound subversion of the myth. The premise here relies on an astrological prophecy. The royal astrologers predict that Sita will bring about the total destruction of Ravana and the entire Asura civilization.
Normally, a king would eliminate the threat.
But Ravana, feeling an unconditional, overwhelming fatherly love, cannot bring himself to harm his infant daughter. He secretly sends her away to be raised elsewhere.
Years later, he learns that she has married Rama and has been exiled to the brutal, dangerous Dandaka forest. So when he swoops in on his chariot, he doesn't kidnap her out of lust or revenge. He takes her to Lanka to rescue her from the harsh realities of the forest.
He wants to protect his daughter and give her the luxurious life of an Asura princess.
Exactly. He knows the ancient prophecy. He knows that bringing her back to Lanka will spark a catastrophic war that will end his life. And he does it anyway, fully sacrificing himself out of fatherly love.
It's brilliant because it asks the listener to consider a vital historiographical question. How does changing the protagonist change the entire moral architecture of the story? If history is written by the victors, then the original Ramayana is the history of the Devtas, the Aryans.
But the vanquished have a voice, too.
And that voice of the vanquished became a literal, powerful political tool in the 20th century. During the Dravidian movement in South India, which, as the sources note, was a political awakening that fought against the perceived cultural and linguistic imperialism of the Aryan North, they literally flipped the Ramayana script.
Yes, in 1946, a scholar named Pulavar Kusantai wrote the Ravana Kavyam. It is a massive 3,100-stanza epic poem written in Tamil. In this text, Ravana is the undisputed, glorious hero.
He is depicted as the brave, highly cultured king of the South, desperately defending his homeland and his sister's honor against aggressive, uncivilized northern invaders.
We should note that we are just imparting the perspectives of the source material here, not taking sides. But the political implications of this text were so severe that the Indian government actually banned the book for several decades because it was viewed as radically disruptive to the mainstream cultural narrative.
So it raises an incredible question. Is Ravana a historical king who ruled an actual island, a mythological monster designed to scare children, or a potent political symbol used for modern revolutions?
The answer is likely that he is all three. But there is a fourth dimension we haven't touched upon yet, and it might be the most important one. What if Ravana isn't an external historical or political figure at all?
What if he represents something operating inside you, the listener, right now?
Oh, I love where this is going. Let's dive into the philosophical allegory, because you can read the Ramayana as an exciting action-packed war story, but sages and philosophers have also read it as a precise metaphorical map of human consciousness.
Exactly. This is the metaphysical discourse analysis of the epic. In this interpretation, the characters aren't flesh and blood people fighting over an island. They are active components of our own internal spiritual anatomy.
Break that down for us.
Lord Rama represents the Paramatma, the supreme soul, the ultimate tranquil divine reality. Sita represents the Jivatma, the individual human soul.
Which leaves Ravana. What is he?
Ravana represents Manas, the turbulent, easily distracted human mind. And remember those 10 heads? We discussed them earlier as symbols of his scholarly knowledge.
Right, the supercomputer.
But in the metaphysical allegory, they represent something much more dangerous. They represent the 10 sense and motor organs of the human body, or the 10 negative emotions that constantly plague the human mind.
Which are?
Kama, which is lust, Krodha, anger, Moha, delusion, Lobha, greed, Mada, pride, Matsarya, envy, Buddhi, intellect, Manas, mind, Chitta, will, and Ahamkara, ego.
Think of it like a corporate boardroom. Your mind, Ravana, is the CEO. But instead of being in control, the CEO is being screamed at by 10 chaotic, demanding executives, your senses and your ego, who want everything right now.
That's a perfect analogy. So what does this all mean for the inciting incident of the story, the kidnapping of Sita? Let's look at it through this psychological lens. Rama, the supreme soul, and Sita, the individual soul, are together at peace in the forest. Then, a magical golden deer appeal.
And the deer represents the glittering, deceptive illusions of the material world. Money, status, fleeting pleasures. Sita is distracted by it, and she asks Rama to go catch it.
Yes, and the exact moment the individual soul becomes distracted by material illusion and is separated from the supreme soul, the mind Ravana swoops in.
The mind, completely hijacked by its 10 screaming executives.
Exactly. Its sensory organs and negative emotions kidnap the individual soul. It drags Sita far, far away across a vast ocean to the island of Lanka.
And Lanka, in this internal allegory, represents the physical body, isolated by the vast ocean of worldly sorrow and endless material desires.
Precisely. So the individual soul is trapped inside the physical body, held hostage by the ego, the pride, and the senses, completely separated from the divine reality. It feels hopeless. Sita sits in the grove, weeping, thinking she will never be rescued.
But that is exactly how we feel when we are consumed by a severe bout of anxiety or greed or anger. We feel totally disconnected from any sense of internal peace or higher purpose. Our mind has kidnapped us.
It has. Therefore, the entire epic war of the Ramayana, the monkeys building the stone bridge, the massive bloody battles, the burning of the city of Lanka, it's not a historical military campaign.
It's an internal battle.
It is an internal spiritual allegory. It represents the arduous, agonizing battle of daily meditation, discipline, and self-control required to conquer the ego, master the 10 senses, and rescue the individual soul so it can reunite with the divine.
So when Rama finally shoots the arrow into Ravana's chest.
It is the supreme soul finally subduing the unruly, ego-driven mind.
Wow. It changes the way you read every single line of the text. It makes the story so deeply personal. And because of this profound philosophical depth, and because Ravana is seen as a brilliant scholar who fell victim to his own humanity, there are places in the world today where burning his effigy on Dussehra isn't seen as a celebration. It's actually considered a profound insult.
The modern legacy of Ravana is incredibly localized. While millions celebrate his death, there are specific, vibrant communities that flat out refuse to participate in the good versus evil narrative of Dussehra.
Right. Let's take the listener on a quick tour of these locations, because the sources detail 6 specific places in India where Ravana is actively worshipped, mourned, or deeply revered today. First, we have Bizrak, a village in Uttar Pradesh.
This village is believed to be named after his father, Vishrava.
And is considered Ravana's actual birthplace. During Dussehra, when the rest of the country is setting off fireworks and cheering his effigies burn, Bizrak goes completely quiet. They do not celebrate.
They mourn him.
Yes. They hold solemn prayers and shraddh ceremonies, which are Hindu rituals for deceased ancestors. For a man, they respectfully call Dada Ravana, or Grandfather Ravana. They actually mourn his death.
Then you have Mandsaur in Madhya Pradesh and Mandore in Rajasthan. Both of these regions claim to be the maternal home of Queen Mandodari, Ravana's wife. Therefore, the local populations treat Ravana with the utmost respect as their royal son-in-law.
Mandsaur actually boasts a towering, permanent 35-foot statue of him, and they offer prayers to honor his intellect rather than condemning his flaws. And there's a strong feminist perspective to acknowledge here regarding Mandodari herself.
Absolutely. The modern critiques celebrate her as a figure of powerful moral agency. She stood by her husband in times of war, but she never stopped calling out his wrongdoings.
She repeatedly urged him to return Sita and choose the path of righteousness. She was the voice of reason he tragically ignored.
Moving on. In Ravangram, Madhya Pradesh, there is an entire village literally named in his honor. The Kanyakubja Brahmins there perform daily pujas, devotional rituals to a 10-foot reclining idol of him. They believe Ravana himself was a Kanyakubja Brahmin, one of their own.
And in Kakinada, Andhra Pradesh, and Kangra, Himachal Pradesh, you have specific temple sites that honor his intense, unwavering devotion to Lord Shiva, rather than focusing on his conflict with Rama.
But I think perhaps the most striking modern reverence comes from the Gandhi people.
They're a large tribal community in central India. They don't just respect him as a scholar, they revere him as an ancient Gond king and their 10th Dharma guru, or supreme spiritual teacher.
Yes. The Gandhi perspective is fascinating. They believe the entire narrative of him being a demonic villain was a historical smear campaign orchestrated by the invading Aryans to subjugate and demonize their indigenous ancestors.
So during the exact same time as Dussehra, when effigies are burning elsewhere, the Gandhi people celebrate Ravana with massive elephant processions, honoring the memory of their mighty misunderstood ancestor.
It's a complete inversion of the mainstream culture. And, the ultimate proof of Ravana's complex greatness doesn't even come from his modern supporters or subaltern texts.
Where does it come from?
It comes directly from his greatest enemy in the original Valmiki text. At the very end of the war, Ravana is lying broken on the battlefield, mortally wounded by Rama's divine arrow. He is taking his final, labored breaths.
What does Rama do? He doesn't stand over him and gloat.
He turns to his brother, Lakshmana, and gives him a stunning command. Rama says to Lakshmana, "Go to him quickly. He is the greatest scholar of our time, and his knowledge will die with him. Before he passes, go sit at his feet and humbly ask him to teach you the lessons of statecraft, ethics, and the duties of a king."
Even the divine hero recognized the fallen villain as the absolute greatest teacher in the world.
It's an incredible image. Lakshmana, the man who mutilated Ravana's sister and started the whole thing, walks over and sits respectfully at the dying king's feet.
And Ravana, putting aside his hatred in his final moments, imparts his final wisdom. He tells Lakshmana, "Never underestimate your enemy. Delay violent or angry acts as long as possible, and never reveal your deepest secrets to anyone."
A lesson he learned the hard way, since his own brother Vibhishana revealed the secret of his death to Rama.
It is such a poignant, deeply respectful end to this apocalyptic war.
It perfectly encapsulates the profound Hindu understanding of human nature. The massive battle was fought to restore cosmic dharma, to correct a terrible wrong. But the victor still bowed in reverence to the intellectual wisdom and the inherent underlying greatness of the vanquished.
Wow. Okay, we've covered an immense amount of ground today. We started with the mission to deconstruct a monster, and we have journeyed through the painful life of a marginalized half-blood who weaponized his rejection to become a master scholar and scientist.
We've seen a tragic king brought down by cosmic curses.
A fiercely protective brother, blinded by an unchecked massive ego, and ultimately a metaphysical representation of our own wandering, distracted minds.
If there's a core takeaway for you as you listen to this, it's that Ravana's story is a timeless, urgent warning. It teaches us that unparalleled intellectual knowledge, without the internal wisdom and discipline required to control our senses and our ego, inevitably leads to our own destruction.
You can have 10 heads worth of sheer intellect, but if you let your primal desire steer the ship, you will crash.
Exactly.
But before we let you go, we want to leave you with one final, lingering thought to mull over. Something we found deep in the sources that absolutely begs for further exploration and maybe a bit of wild speculation.
The ancient texts frequently mention that under Ravana's rule, Lanka was a hub of unimaginable, almost futuristic advancement.
Yes. The sources specifically describe him flying the Pushpaka Vimana, which is explicitly detailed as an aerospace machine, a flying chariot that could travel at immense speeds and hover in the sky, which he won from his half-brother Kubera.
Indeed, it's a tantalizing detail. Some Sri Lankan historical lore suggests that under his regime, there were massive advancements not just in herbal medicine, but in actual aviation. There are physical locations in Sri Lanka today, like Warriapola, which translates loosely to aircraft landing area, that local legends identify as the actual landing strips for Ravana's flying machines.
So we leave you with this question. Were the magic and divine boons of Ravana's era actually ancient attempts to describe highly advanced prehistoric technology? Was the epic war of the Ramayana actually documenting a devastating, catastrophic conflict that wiped out an ancient, scientifically advanced civilization, leaving behind only myths of flying chariots and exploding arrows? Next time you look up at the night sky, we want you to wonder just how advanced the 10-headed demon king of Lanka truly was.
As we've seen today, the line between myth, magic, and science is often just a matter of time and perspective.
It really makes you think. So we're back to where we started. You go into the clinic, you take the x-ray, and you expect to see the clean, obvious break between the hero and the villain.
But when you look at the X-ray of Ravana, the image is incredibly blurred.
The bones are setting in a way we never expected. The diagnostic waters are permanently muddy. And honestly, discovering that complexity makes this story infinitely more beautiful. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the narrative.